Hello, my name is Erica Adler, and I'm going to be talking about my biome, the temperate grasslands. So, I'm going to start with an introduction to the temperate grassland and just some basic information about what it is and what lives there. So, the temperate grassland is located on every continent except for Antarctica. It has different names depending on the continent. In North America, known as a prairie, South America, the pampas, in Africa, the velds, in Asia and Europe, the steppes, and finally in Australia, downs. So, it's a very versatile biome. As for the primary productivity, since it is a grassland, it is somewhat productive, but it is hindered by cold winters and a lack of trees. You can see that as savanna, which is like the temperate grassland, but without that cold winter, has 1,000 more kilocalories per square meter per year, whereas the temperate forest has almost three times as much of that production from the temperate grasslands, 2,000 kilocalories. But that's still more than something like a desert or a tundra, since they do have warm winters and a lot of plant life. So the climate. Temperate means hot in the summer and cold in the winter. The temperature depends on latitude, but it ranges from negative 20 degrees Celsius to, 30 degrees Celsius. And then as for rainfall or snowfall, it ranges from 500 to 900 millimeters of precipitation per year. This can be seen on the climatograph. On the left are different temperate grasslands around the world, and then on the right is a local example. So while in Houston we live in more of a tropical zone, as you move further into Texas, you're actually reaching that temperate grassland area. Even though it's a lot of urbanization, which I'll get into on my negative human impacts. But you can see that these are some good examples of what the standard climatograph is going to look like for a temperate grassland. So now some plants and how they fit into the ecological niche. So starting with buffalo grass, it gets its name because of course buffaloes used to eat it. Now this is located in the American Great Plains. All the species I'm going to be talking about in this section are from this area because since there are so many different types of temperate grassland around the world, I'm going to be focusing on this one specific area so we can see how these different species interconnect. So buffalo grass has thick roots, therefore the whole plant doesn't die when it gets grazed upon, just the stem, and then it can grow back. This also prevents soil erosion, and it's also very resistant to heat and dryness, meaning that it can photosynthesize a lot during the summer and survive through those cold winters where it might not be able to. My second plant is a switchgrass. So it has an extremely deep root system for soil conservation, and its height also provides shelter for small animals like rodents and birds. So now some herbivores. So on the left, the pronghorn, often called the pronghorn antelope, it's the fastest land mammal in the Western Hemisphere, and it can run up to 90 kilometers per hour. This is obviously to evade predators, so it's adapted to the many predators of the temperate grassland, which I'll show on the next slide. And it also has this thick fur for winter. Now, this thick fur is also seen on the white-tailed jackrabbit, a smaller animal that would be the type to hide in the switchgrass that I showed on the last slide. They're also nocturnal to avoid predation because, once again, the temperate grassland is just full of predators. And of course, it has that thick fur to help it blend in the snow and also survive those cold winters. So now some carnivores and omnivores. On the left is solely a carnivore. It hunts things like hares. It's adapted to squeeze through small tunnels and burrows to chase those other small rodents such as hares, voles, or shrews. And it also has sharp teeth. Even though it's quite a small animal, it's often smaller than its prey, but its teeth are sharp enough to snap through the vertebrae, paralyzing and killing its prey. And then we have also an omnivore, which is the coyote, often mistaken for a wolf. And now it's adapted to hunt in family groups, meaning that it can take down larger prey like the pronghorn, and it also has a strong digestive tract that allows it to eat plants. Now we can see this all come together in the food web here. So you can see that our primary producers are going to be the switchgrass and the buffalo grass, which are consumed by the omnivore coyote and also the herbivore jackrabbit and pronghorn. And then that jackrabbit is also going to be consumed by the weasel, which is also consumed by the coyote, and the pronghorn is also consumed by the coyote. So in this food graph, you have the primary producers, which is the switchgrass and the buffalo grass. Then the white-tailed jackrabbit and pronghorn are going to be your primary consumers. The least weasel is going to be a secondary consumer, and then the coyote is actually a primary, secondary, and tertiary consumer because it's eating both rabbits, grass, pronghorns, and weasels. So now that you know what the temperate grassland is, I'm going to talk about some negative human impacts and possible solutions. So let's talk about some endangered animals, or animals and plants. Now, these are not necessarily from the Great Plains. So starting with Abronia ammophila, which is Yellowstone sand verbena. Now, it's located in Yellowstone National Park, and it's critically endangered because it's actually endemic to this park and cannot grow anywhere else. However, as people have come to the park and they're trampling on it as they go off path, it's almost extinct. And I'm going to talk about solutions to this later. But my next plant is Mead's milkweed, essential for the monarch butterfly, and it's endangered in the United States where it's grown because of habitat loss and urbanization. Next, some endangered animals. We have the American burying beetle, which is critically endangered. Now, this is mainly due to habitat loss. It doesn't have anywhere to live. It's located in the central and eastern United States, but it's on its way to becoming quickly extinct because it has simply nowhere to live. As these grasslands are one of the most targeted groups for human urbanization. Now, finally, my last endangered animal is the black-footed ferret. This has been hunted widely by farmers around North America where it's located. Therefore, it's endangered because it's seen as a predator. It creates burrows, disrupts farmland, and so it's quite hunted, which is unfortunate because it's such a unique animal. So now I'm going to go into some actual environmental impacts of humans specifically. So my first one is wildfires. Now it's important to note that natural wildfires are actually essential to temperate grasslands health. However, it's these human-caused wildfires that create an issue. So in the dry season, especially, the grassland is very, very vulnerable, and then human impacts like campers coming, dropping cigarettes, not properly putting out campfires leads to these huge, massive wildfires. And since the grassland is so dry, the whole thing burns. Now, of course, this means a lot of dead plants, also possibly dead animals that get caught up. But even the animals that escape have lost their home, they have nowhere to live, and it can mean a whole collapse of this ecosystem because it's very hard to recover once the whole thing has burned down. Next, another environmental impact is overhunting in the temperate grasslands. So, example of this was the American bison. There were 60 million before European settlers came, and then by 1889, there were only 541 individuals remaining. Now, that was for food, but also farmers afraid of their cattle or livestock getting eaten by predators can be seen through the gray wolf, which was hunted from thousands to the gray wolf dipped below 300 in the late 1900s, and some other carnivores like the American lion are now fully extinct because of this. Now, this leads to a near collapse of the food web because if you look at the food web, it's kind of a very delicate balance. If the predator is gone, then the herbivore grows too much, then the plant becomes extinct, and then the herbivore has nothing to eat, and the herbivore can become extinct. Or on the other hand, if the bison goes extinct, then the carnivores that rely on it to eat go extinct, and it's a whole issue, which is why that animal conservation is so important. So, how can we solve these? Well, number one, animal rights groups have led to anti hunting law, which you can see in this protest. The government has also spread awareness of human caused wildfires. So you have something like this infographic here saying never discard your cigarettes. And so hopefully, and also it's now illegal. You can get fined or even sent to prison if you don't follow these safety regulations. And then finally, and probably the most important, government programs to reintroduce species such as bison have been wildly successful, as now there are over 31,000 wild bison, up from that 541. And now there are also movements to reintroduce wolves and other predators into Yellowstone and the surrounding areas. So, now some even more devastating environmental and human impacts. So, number one is agriculture and unsustainable crop growth. Now, obviously, the temperate grassland is very desirable for farming, even though in the winters it's not very useful. In the summer, it's quite productive. So, bad crop practices can lead to devastating effects. So, monocropping or only growing one crop, it destroys the biodiversity of the land and also leads to nutrient lack. Then, toxic pesticides run into the water. And finally, non native plants can grow outside of that farmland and become invasive, killing all sorts of native species. Then finally, the most important impact and kind of the cause of all these other ones is human urbanization. Now, this statistic I have here is from National Geographic and is quite shocking. Almost half of all temperate grasslands have been converted for industrial or agricultural usage. So, habitat loss means that many of these species that are endemic, only surviving in the temperate grassland, are becoming endangered or extinct. But of course, the flatness and temperateness of this biome makes it ideal for human cities, such as Austin. So, what can be done? Well, the main thing is creation of protected areas by the National Park Service. So, Yellowstone National Park is a great example. All these things, all these species I showed that live there. And then also the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, passing pesticide usage laws, hopefully leading to more sustainable farming practices. But in the end, and this is the end of my PowerPoint, the most important thing to note is that the temperate grassland is under attack because it's such a desirable place for humans living, but it's not meant for humans. It's meant for the plants and animals that are endemic there, that live there, that rely on it. So it's essential that we protect these lands, not for our use, not for our taking of its resources, but to preserve the homes of the many, many species that rely on this essential biome. Thank you.